Welcome to Ayahuasca Awakening the Spirit Within. I'm your host, Claire Quirk, founder of Yagéwaska, and we are an ayahuasca retreat centre that is led by Indigenous Colombian shamans. And you're going to love this podcast if you're curious to hear more about ayahuasca and everything that it entails. So in these podcasts, I'll be speaking to people who have massively transformed their lives, having been on retreat with us. I'm talking about people who have been cured of so-called incurable illnesses, people who have been cured of anxiety, depression, and addiction, people who have then gone on to find their purpose and mission in life, atheists who have found God. You name it, you will be hearing all about it on this podcast. And we'll also be speaking about the difficulties and the challenges that can come up in this process and how to overcome them. And we'll also be speaking about the difficulties and challenges that can come up in this process and how to overcome them. We'll be speaking about the hard work it takes on your part before, during and after retreat to get as much out of the experience as possible. And we'll be speaking to people who haven't had an overnight radical transformation, but whose transformation has been much more of an incremental process over the months and the years that followed. Ayahuasca is a natural medicine and she works in her own unique way with each unique individual. So like I said, my name is Claire and I'm going to explain a wee bit about myself and how I ended up working with ayahuasca in the first place before going on to become a medicine worker myself. So like many of yous, I faced a lot of difficulties and a lot of challenges in my life that I've had to overcome. I had depression, I had anxiety, I had social anxiety, I had alcohol and drug addictions, specifically a really bad addiction for years with Valium that I had to withdraw from twice. I had a full-blown nervous breakdown when I was about 28 years old. And for a lot of people, that would have been the rock bottom. For me, it wasn't, because I didn't have the tools, the modalities, the support that I needed at that time to set my life on a different path. So I descended just further into the madness and the chaos for another few years. And it wasn't until I got to my early 30s, about 10 years ago, that things really started to change for me. And this was before I got to ayahuasca. So what had happened was I'd got to the stage, I was like, I can't go on like this anymore. I can't live like this. And I was in my room back home in Glasgow one day and I received this, which I now know is a download. It was just this massive realization that came to me that was basically like, this is all my fault. Up until that point, I was a massive victim and a huge victim mentality, which just kept me stuck my whole life. But in that defining moment, when that information came through to me, it was such a shock. But then straight after it came through, this awareness that I can change this. I have the power to change this. Only I can do this. And from that day forward, I decided to come off the drinking drugs. I'd previously withdrawn from the Valium already, but I decided to come off the other drugs, stop drinking, and of course, very, very challenging because you're used to having these coping mechanisms. And when you stop the drink and you stop the drugs, everything comes up to the surface. Everything gets worse at first. You've got all these feelings and all these traumas that you've been blocking out that are just right up in the surface. But I was so kind of resolved to transform my life. I had such a strong will to do it that I just threw everything at the process. So I signed up a psychologist. She is incredible. I work with her to this day. Signed up for an intensive course of therapy with her for 3 months. Basically started meditating every day, which was so challenging because obviously my mind was chaos at this point. Started doing breath work, started listening to podcasts, started reading books. And at first it was very, very challenging. Obviously, you don't see instant differences in this when you start, but something just kept telling me to continue with it, even though I wasn't seeing the results yet, even though I was feeling terrible. And I continued and I continued. And I later came to realize actually that that was my soul, that was my spirit that kept me going, that kept telling me to continue. And then a while down the line, I started to really notice all these different things. My mind wasn't as chaotic. I started talking to myself differently. I started to have different belief systems about myself. I started to develop, in self-love and self-confidence. And then subsequently, I started to go through a spiritual awakening. I didn't know what was happening to me at this point because I didn't believe in any of this type of spiritual stuff. Thought it was all bullshit. Didn't believe in God. Didn't believe in the angelic realm. None of this type of stuff. So when it was happening to me, it was really, really incredible because I was like, wow, what's happening? What's going on here? But I actually had to Google it to figure out what was happening to me. And then I cottoned on. I was like, geez, I'm going through a spiritual awakening. And it was a beautiful period. It was just so awe-inspiring. It was absolutely incredible. And I kept on that path, just kept going, just kept reaping the rewards. And of course, it isn't always like a, pure picnic. There's difficult times and everything as well. But I kept going on that path for another while. And by this point, because I was connected to spirit, I was receiving a lot of information, a lot of downloads through, etc. And then I basically received 4 call-ins in 1 week with regards to ayahuasca, and they came out the blue. They all came at the same time, so much so that it was so evident to me that it was a call-in. At first, I had watched a documentary on Netflix about it. Then the next day, I saw a double-page spread in one of the tabloid papers about it. I'm like, this is interesting. Then someone on the bus one day started talking to me about it. And then a shaman friended me on Facebook all in the 1 week. I'm like, right, okay, I get it. I'm going to go, I'm going to move to Peru. I'm going to go to the jungle. I'm going to start living with shamans and start working with this ayahuasca, etc. Bearing in mind at the time I didn't speak any Spanish or anything like that. And I had to stay back in Glasgow for a year after I received that calling in order to save the money to be able to fund my trip. And then in January 2017, I flew out to Peru and I was living in Pucallpa for 2 months with a shamanic family. They were from the Shipibo community. And that was my first experience of the medicine. And it was incredible. It was phenomenal. My very first ceremony was actually very, very gentle. And then as I kept going on with the work, it's just wait to experience this. It's something else. Then I started hitting my crazy tumours. And after I was there for 2 months, I travelled up through more jungle areas in Peru, working with different shamans, crossed over to Colombia. The minute I crossed over to Colombia, I just fell in love with it. I just love the place. I love the people. So I started to drink with various shamans there. And then I finally settled in Medellin, Colombia, where I've been for the past 8 years now. And in that time, I've obviously been working on this path. So when I started with the medicine, obviously at first you're starting drinking, you're doing your own work, your own healing work. And in that first kind of year or two, I was drinking a lot of medicine. And it was never my plan. It was never my intention to be a medicine worker. But what you are going to find is when you start to work with this medicine, she very, very firmly puts you on your path, whatever that may be. And mine is the path of the medicine. So my friends would come to me in Medellin. They knew I was working with a lot of ayahuasca. They're like, Claire, going to take us to a ceremony? I'm like, yeah, sure. Take them to a ceremony, look after them, explain everything to them about it and everything like this. And then it just started to grow from there. Then I started to do little retreats down in the jungle each month, just with little small groups. And it's like a baptism of fire when you start in this work, and you are training in the trenches essentially as you go, and you need to learn quick. So I was continuing doing that. And then I received another big calling from Spirit. And you're talking, this was about 6 years ago now. And it was basically telling me, you need to take the medicine, you need the medicine to get bigger reach, etc. And it was a calling that was coming through for a long time, but I wasn't actioning it because there was a lot of fear involved, a lot of uncertainty. But eventually I bit the bullet, and everything has just really, really snowballed from there. Thanks to the work that we do. I have an absolutely phenomenal team. They are absolutely just the best that work with me in this work, and it's an absolute blessing to have them by my side. And of course, over the years, word has just grown, word of mouth about everything that we're doing. People then go on to bring their friends, their colleagues, their family members. And we have now a massive, massive community with thousands of people in it who come to us for the healing. So that was just a bit there about myself to help you to understand how I ended up working with this beautiful medicine in the first place.